Okay, everyone, so thank you for coming. I'll start by thanking British Skydiving for giving me the opportunity and the platform for this. This lesson came about as last year as a pre-advanced instructor candidate. I was required to provide an original presentation, kind of safety-minded, so this is where it came from. I'll begin by introducing myself for anyone that doesn't know me. My name's Phil Webley. I'm a Flight 1 instructor on the sport and military departments. I've got just over 5,000 skydives. I hold AFFI, tandem and CSI ratings. The coach ratings I'm most active in is free flying, tracking, canopy piloting and the tunnel. I do quite a bit of FS coaching as well at the basic level for the military. I'm a current competitor in canopy piloting, current Team GB with that. Previously, I've competed in VFS. I accumulated about 20 years in the military before I left about 3-4 years ago. Some of that time, I was mostly involved in parachuting most of my time, but 3 years I spent in the Red Devils display team. So the aim of this is to discuss the safety requirements of various special disciplines within skydiving, and how they can be performed safely and incorporated as part of a regular DZ operation. What we'll talk about, high performance landings, free fly and formation skydiving, that debate of who goes first, tracking or angle flying, same thing, just different name really. We'll talk a little bit about solo free fly and coach jumps. And finally, we'll talk about flocking, high pulls and canopy formations. So I take part actively in all these disciplines. So on pretty much a jump by jump basis, I'm concerned of getting in someone's way and affecting someone else's jump. So this is constantly on my mind. So introducing this then, someone was quoted that the downside of skydiving is that we have to rely on other people to not kill us. There's many skydiving disciplines now. They've all got their own needs and requirements and characteristics. And if we're not taking part in them, we may not be aware of those things. And everyone comes to the drop zone, they want to do whatever they want to do without affecting each other and being a danger to each other, right? Now that we've got larger aircraft capacity, it is going to be busier skies, and it's going to be more of a problem, not less. Also, we all need to make it onto that same parachute landing area and then manage the traffic on the way there. So we always need to be thinking and aware of everyone else in the sky with us. What I found, I'm fortunate enough that I get to travel around a lot of drop zones, is some very busy drop zones, up to like 5 aircrafts operating. They're exposed to a lot of these disciplines I'm going to talk about, and they find it really easy to deconflict with them, whereas maybe you go to a quieter drop zone, doesn't get so much exposure, they may be reluctant to allow some of these disciplines to happen just because they're not too sure of how to keep everyone safe. High performance landings then. So I am going to talk about all of these disciplines at a really basic level. So if you take part in them, it might seem like I'm stating the obvious, but someone that's not so involved in them, they may not know some of the basics of them. A high performance landing is more than a 90-degree turn onto final, usually. We achieve quite high descent rates. If we see anyone swoop in, the descent rate is a lot faster. And also pilots in those turns, they can be blind to other parachutists until it's too late. So this is what a typical 270-degree high-performance turn looks like. This is some FlySight data that's been put onto Google Earth. It will start a range between 600 and 900 feet, depending on many factors like canopy, canopy size, weight of the pilot, etc. The space it will take up is about 100 meters offset. Let's just use my laser pointer. Okay, forget about that. And then about 100 meters back from when the pilot first reaches ground level, about 100 meters back from that. If we look at another typical turn, the 450-degree turn, again about another 100 meters offset and 140 meters back from where the pilot actually finally reaches ground level. So this is some of the things that may not be considered by someone that's not taken part in this discipline. So we've now got HPLAs at a lot of drop zones where this stuff is happening. And there's some pros and cons. The pros is we separate the landings by space and sometimes by time as well. So we're separating people performing a regular landing and people taking part in high performance landings. It has certainly reduced traffic and has really been a good move into keeping us safe. And I generally do welcome that idea. Some of the cons to them is some of the HPLAs are quite tight, so you actually need to be a pretty good swooper to begin with to safely make it onto that. If you're at the more beginner or intermediate stages, focusing on the accuracy of a tight landing area where you're trying to figure out those maneuvers and learn the nuances of them can actually be detrimental and put you in danger. I realise we're restricted by whatever the drop zone has available to them, and also it's a minority discipline, so we can't really cater too much to the small number of jumpers that take part in this. Sometimes, though, there's no consideration of everything that happens at altitude. There may be consideration for what's happening at ground level. We're keeping everyone separate. We're not thinking about what's happening at altitude or even on the base leg on the approach to these maneuvers. So some things that I want to consider then is the approach on the base leg and some of the blind spots that these jumpers will have. We're going to talk about opposing patterns. We're going to see some diagrams of exactly what I mean by that. And also those high performance turns where you generate a lot of speed, having those deeper and further downwind. We'll see how that can keep us safe as well. And possibly designating a portion of airspace where no one else can fly in, so we can have those high-speed maneuvers where we're blind to other jumpers and have a high descent rate, but keeping everyone away from that and making people aware that that kind of thing will be occurring in that portion of airspace. So with this diagram, we've got PLA on the left, HPLA on the right. Imagine now that jumpers are landing towards us, so kind of like out of the screen. So we've got someone that's going to set up for a high-performance landing, and the shape that high-performance landing will take is roughly this kind of shape if we're looking at it from the front. So they're going to do their turn 270 degrees and land towards us. The danger of this sort of situation is we may have someone coming in doing a regular landing. The average altitude someone will be on the base leg is between 300 and 600 feet, whereas the average altitude someone will be starting a 270 degree turn is between 600 and 900 feet, roughly. So at this point, as someone's trying to make their way in, the first time the high performance swooper may see someone is when they're already 180 degrees into their rotation. At that point, they're already traveling maybe like 50, 60 miles an hour vertically, and quick reactions will be required, but also at that point it can be too late to avoid someone. So it's almost always safer to extend the HPLA. So if we have got a left-hand pattern, it's almost always safer to have the HPLA extending past, so that the maneuvers that eat up more altitude are deconflicted from the regular landings that are happening. We can also have opposing patterns. So if we're coming in from opposite sides, as that swooper is approaching and making decisions if they're going to go for their high performance landing or not, they have a lot more information of what's happening in front of them. They can then possibly predict that a jumper may encroach onto the high performance landing area. And then at a safe altitude, they can abort that landing and having that information. There's less blind spots. So a lot of advantages by having opposing landing patterns, and everyone briefed that they are not to cross into the other landing area. Sometimes we can have possibly everyone landing in the same area, but some people are doing smaller turns or no high performance turns, and some people are doing high performance turns. It's almost always safer to move those high performance turns further downwind. When I was training with my old VFS team, one of my teammates wasn't doing any high performance landings, and he felt it was safer to be deeper and further back from everyone, but actually we were all kind of starting to get a little bit dangerously close to him, and when we swapped everything over and had him land where he was going to, and we were just going to push further downwind, then obviously as we're starting everything at higher altitude and eating up more altitude, it was much more deconflicted and less congested. So this ties in nicely to talk about hop and pops. Organising our exit order by wing loading, so high to low. How many people here know their wing loading by a show of hands? Okay, it's not too bad actually. I do often find on flight line when I'm trying to organise exit orders, like people won't know their wing loadings. If we organise ourselves high to low, then that means the higher wing loadings will be first of all exiting first and landing sooner, and those lower wing loadings exiting last and landing after. So we've got that natural separation. It is starting to not be quite so easy. So sail canopies are canopies such as peregrines, petras, all that kind of stuff. If you've ever been behind one of those, even though you're on a high performance canopy yourself, they have the potential, as well as going fast, they have the potential to go really slow. So sometimes you're just kind of like stuck really behind them, and it's quite difficult to stay above them, even though you may be on a slightly lower wing loading. Just started jumping a mutant, and I was to find out that they have like a really flat glide. So again, before I started jumping them, I was routinely like stuck behind them. Sometimes someone who's like quite experienced will say, "Oh, I'm on a mutant, so I'll go first." But actually, because they have a flatter glide and a slower descent rate, when you're a normal harness, even though it's similar wing loadings, you can actually end up really struggling to stay behind them. So that kind of stuff is just new stuff that needs to be just shaken out a little bit. We also sometimes get low wing loadings, but they like to take long delays. Maybe like hop and pop jumps are a little bit cheaper, so they want to do a free fall jump. The danger of this is that we can then have a high performance canopy then meeting the lower wing loading at a lower altitude. I see hop and pops as a perfect method to get under your canopy, get extra time and extra altitude under your canopy and less congested airspace. So I don't really see the function of a hop and pop to kind of take like long delays. It's really the clues in the name, hop and pop, right? Okay, so now we're going to go into the free fly and formation skydiving first. I'm going to deliberately remain impartial with this. I don't see there's much point in favouring one or the other. I jump at drop zones where we have both options. They both have their pitfalls. They both have their advantages. And again, there's not much point in taking favour to it, because as you go to different drop zones, you'll have to respect their rules. Some data to consider is the forward throw of a free flyer is on average about 50% more than a formation skydive group. Caveat to that is you have to be a pretty good free fly to get that extra forward throw, but it is a consideration nonetheless. The free fall drift for flat flyers versus free flyers is at least double, and we're going to have a look at some data in some of the upcoming slides. So what I'll call the traditional, because it's been happening more where formation skydiving exits first. So we've got our wind blowing left to right on the screen. We'll have an FS group and a free fly group. So we can see that the free fall drift is much less on the free fly group. What I've got here with the sort of canopy ride portion in the different colour is, I'm going to make a generalization here, but what's generally happening at drop zones is someone that's progressed to free flying will be on a smaller, more high performance canopy. It's not always the case, and you get some people on high performance canopies taking part in FS, but it is a generalization. So those guys that are doing free flying kind of out the back, who've got higher performance canopies, they maybe don't have as much range when they've opened deep as someone with a bigger canopy. So that can be a disadvantage of it. So the pros for this is that the free flyers have less free fall drift, and also they have a faster descent rate. So generally everyone will open nice and spread out, and they'll open at similar times. So if we kind of see crude animation, FS exits first, whereas free fly exits after but falls much faster. So they generally open at around about the same time. The disadvantage of this method is generally jumpers performing free flying are on slightly higher performance canopies. They're further away, and they have to maybe work their way through traffic back to the landing area of those slower canopies. So some data, if we had about a 10,000 foot descent and an average of 10 knots all the way down, so it's really conservative because winds at altitude are generally a lot stronger than that. An FS group will get about 300 meters or 1,000 feet of free fall drift, whereas a free fly group will get about 100 meters or about 300 feet of free fall drift. So that's something to bear in mind. So the newer version, and there are more drop zones that are adopting this, is the free flyers exit first, and then FS groups exit last. So the advantage to this is that free flyers are going to descend faster, and if they are also under faster canopies, there's plenty of vertical separation. Sometimes I'm, 1,000 feet below my opening point, and then I see like an FS group opening. Sometimes, well, I've landed, and the FS group is still haven't started their landing pattern. So crude animation, got the free flyers, they've exited, and the formation skydiving jumpers, they're still in free fall by the time the free flyers are under canopy and descending fairly quickly. There are some disadvantages to this. If that first FS group doesn't respect the separation, then we can end up with jumpers really close to each other. So we can have this kind of thing going on. And this could be like a closer call than we realize more often than we think. A lot of times when everything goes according to plan, free flyers have opened and they're already descending under canopy. But for all we know, more often than we think, the FS group is opening in pretty much the same spot. So it will just take that, all the Swiss cheese kind of lining up, and maybe a free flyer having a premature opening or a free flyer opening higher to then have a serious collision. I've never seen this, but a lot of people have told me in really high winds, what you can have is in free fall, the formation skydiving group can cross over with that extra free fall drift and can cross over the free flyers and then open downwind of the free flyers. Again, that can go on unscathed for a long period of time until something serious happens, like maybe a free flyer has a premature opening. So one way we can alleviate this is by having a crosswind run-in. My main experience of crosswind run-ins is being at drop zones where they have a fixed run-in. It just happens that day, the way the wind's coming, it's crosswind. The advantage of this is that all the groups will drift in the same direction away from jump run. So whatever exit separation we achieve, we're going to have that similar separation at opening. One downside I see with this is that especially the groups exiting first and last, you need to be better trained canopy pilots because we're now quite a lot off the wind line. It's not impossible, but an inexperienced canopy pilot can be caught out by the fact that they're not opening directly upwind. So those jumpers at the beginning and at the end of the jump run just need to be a little bit better trained. Cool, so I'll move on to some tracking profiles then. So if we have our jump run, okay, we are expecting that a tracking group will move off jump run, all right, generally at 90 degrees. Where possible, we should separate any tracking groups by alternating the direction of the track where possible. All right, so we're going to get loads of separation. It's going to be great if we can go in both directions. It's not always possible. Maybe that direction is just the wrong side of the wind, and maybe jumpers don't want to go in one direction just because of where the wind is, or maybe they would be tracking over hazards, so it'd be a risk to open over hazards and flying back over hazards. Where possible, we can separate them by having vertical groups. So if we've got any FS or FF groups, we can put them in between those tracking groups and separate them that way. It is still possible to everyone track in the same direction, but we can have some control measures where the leaders will discuss and maybe pick a ground marker. And the term I use is like an imaginary glass wall, and they decide amongst themselves that, you know, this is the glass wall and we're not going to break it, we're going to stay in our own portion of airspace. So it is still possible, and I see that at drop zones where it's only possible to track in one direction. They'll limit the number of groups, and there'll be something separating them, so a clear marker on the ground that the leaders will be able to see. So there's no excuse to land off. When tracking first started, it was always a bit of a joke, you know, the tracking groups land off. The general mentality was we'll just keep tracking a straight line, track outside of the wind cone, and we've got no hope of making it back. So a leader must understand winds aloft, know where they are, and understanding the concept of the wind cone. Leaders are becoming pretty good now, where they're able to plan and predict exactly where they're going to track and where they're going to open. So that landing off is no excuse nowadays with the discipline of tracking or angle flying. So some control measures I've seen from my travels is a lot of drop zones vet their leaders, so not just anyone is allowed to lead a tracking jump. Maybe you need a certain amount of jumps, at the drop zone, or some further training or clarification that you can prove that you can lead a group without being a danger to yourself or others. It may limit number of groups, especially if you can only track in one direction. I've seen some drop zones you have to manifest as a tracking group, and they're only allowed 2 tracking groups to manifest per load. I've mentioned briefly the concept of glass walls, so we're going to create an imaginary wall using a prominent ground marker and making sure that the groups don't cross into each other's airspace. There's a lot of tracking leader courses now where the nuances of planning a tracking jump, considering wind conditions, and all that information, making it more of a science than guesswork. And I've been on a few of them and really learn a lot every time I go on one. I recently saw an idea of using canopy meeting points. So what I mean by this, so in this case we've got a jump run that was pretty much down the runway, and we had actually more than 4 groups. So we had alternating directions. In this example, we were doing like really high angles, so we weren't actually moving off the jump run that far. The idea of a canopy meeting point is that after opening, everyone heads in the same direction and meets over a point and heads away from jump run and just joins together in like a loose stack, nothing like tight flocking or anything like that, but in a loose stack, and then the lower person leads that group back to the landing area. So the danger when you're doing this kind of stuff is that if everyone is converging as an individual, there's just a lot of canopies to account for, and especially if one of the groups has a straggler that fell behind on the track and jump. It might be really easy to miss that one canopy and then have a collision as everyone's like converging on that jump run. It's much easier to see a group of canopies than an individual canopy. And I really liked how controlled and measured this method made the jumps, which could have been much more chaotic. I'll talk a little bit about solo free fly and coach jumps. So someone that hasn't quite got to grips with sit flying, they can move horizontally back flying at up to like 30 miles an hour. What that means is about 520 meters or almost 2,000 feet over a 40-second jump. So when we're planning to have 300 meters between groups, that means that jumper will move over or under the group that was before or after them and get close to the second group. All right. So I make no bones in maybe insulting someone's intelligence if they're manifested for a solo free fly, if they're aware of the jump run, what their plan is, which way they plan to face. I have had free fallers come past me under canopy. I've also gone past people in free fall and under canopy, and it's not a nice feeling. So yeah, we must orientate perpendicular to running with that, and that goes as well with coach jumps. It's on a coach, not even free fly, even FS. To one of the first priorities is to orientate that two-way perpendicular to jump run. So if there is any movement, students tend to want to work and look for their coach. So if there is any movement, it's going to be in a safe direction and not go encroaching onto another group. One of my teammates in a VFS team, we had a two-way coach jump exiting after us, and the student hit their canopy and broke a line, and then they had to cut away, which was, initially it was a fully functioning open canopy. By the way, I chose not to have any freak out videos because you guys can find all those as much as you want. I didn't want that to detract from the information I'm putting out. So now we're going to talk about flocking, high pulls, and canopy formation. So the sort of disciplines where we open a lot higher than normal. So sometimes if we've got like anyone that's exiting and let's say they're opening at 8,000 feet, 10,000 feet, so anything higher than about 6,000 feet, we just need to be concerned that if we're going to, let's say we drop someone off at 10,000 feet and they're opening straight away, if we're going to make it back round quite quickly for a free fall jump, we could then free fall past them. A good planning factor for regular canopies is about a minute per 1,000 feet. So let's say if we drop someone off at 10,000 feet and we're back round in 3 minutes at 12,000 feet, that means those canopies are still at 7,000 feet. So it's possible danger there of some kind of collision. Generally, if there is someone exiting at higher than a regular hop and pop, I'll make a little mental note of the time to make sure that we don't go back round too quickly and ensure that they're at a safer altitude. What we can do as well, it is difficult to plan for high opening canopies at a really busy drop zone. And sometimes a way to get around that is we can drop all the free fallers at maximum altitude. And if someone wants to open high at 8,000 feet, 10,000 feet, that sort of range, we can go back round and drop those on the way down. Not without its dangers, though. The dangers now is if one of the free fallers has a premature opening or opens high for any reason, maybe like an AFF student, then we've got the potential of either the aircraft colliding with the canopy or the potential of, again, that other pass colliding with someone. One way we can alleviate that is someone who's leading that jump of high opening canopies. They can watch the free fallers as the aircraft's circling and just ensure that there isn't unplanned opening at a higher altitude. But yeah, so as we're starting to see, not everything is not without its dangers, right? The other tricky thing to consider if you're not taking part in these sort of disciplines is that in light winds, these disciplines will want to open way before the drop zone. It's worth noting, like, so sometimes on a flocking jump, I'll want to open 4 kilometers away, which is fine if you're opening at high altitude. What we don't want is we don't want free fallers to then exit after us because you won't make it onto the drop zone. So sometimes there's like a separate green light, and it's worth informing that first free fall group, don't follow us out because it does happen every so often and someone lands off. But then when it's really high winds, we might want to go after everyone, like after the wingsuiters and everyone else, because we want to open as far upwind as possible. I've mentioned glass walls in terms of tracking. This is really important when we have any high opening canopies occurring during a DZ operation. And having a glass wall and a separate portion of airspace for the high canopies can really keep everything safe, but keep the operation running without causing any problems. And we can even have our own offset running, and we'll see that in a diagram in just a little bit. What I've found as I'm taking part in more flocking and organising more flocking, especially on those high wing loadings like the Valkyries, if you see AFF or tandem on your load, you will most likely be at around the same altitude like in the landing pattern. So for that reason, when you're taking part in flocking, which takes a lot of concentration anyway, we generally don't have high performance landings. We'll keep it to a 90-degree landing. And if you ever see AFF or tandems, that should be alarm bells in the fact that 100 or 99% of the time it will be in the landing pattern when you're at the same altitude and you're trying to like pick your way between them. So something that came to my attention quite recently, and it's an update to this lecture. So just got a mutant. I was wanting to do high pulls just so I can have maximum time under canopy. With the really small canopies, you don't get that much time under them anyway. So I wanted to open at full altitude, and there was some CF jumpers, like a light wing loading of like 1.2. They were opening at full altitude. So I thought it'd be fine for myself to also do that and practice my own stuff. What was brought to my attention is that any wingsuiters exiting out the back, say if I exited before all the free fallers, then all the free fallers exit, and then wingsuiters, there is a danger of us meeting at some point. So in that case, it was much safer for me to exit after the wingsuiters, way deep of the drop zone. And that was something that I hadn't considered before. If we're ever going to have flocking groups, we're generally going to still want to exit early. Like I said, exiting about 4 kilometers away means that you can just fly a formation all the way in from like 14,000 feet. And that is still fine to do, but then you probably want to have a discussion with wingsuiters, maybe create a glass wall and make sure the wingsuiters don't come past a certain point, make sure the flockers don't come past a certain point. A flocking group is much easier to see than one lone canopy as well, so that's another way to keep everything a bit safer. So how does that look like? If we're going to have a lot of high pulls, and a lot of the jumps I'm involved with Flight 1 Military is a lot of high pulls, we're going to create an imaginary glass wall, and everyone on the drop zone needs to be briefed, including free fallers, of what's happening. Generally, we'll have an altitude like about 2,500 feet, where we're not going to cross it as high opening canopies until we're below 2,500 feet, and then we can go into our landing pattern and land. So with the free fall side of things, we would then want to brief anyone that was tracking that you can only track to the north of the screen, and you certainly don't want any tracking groups to track into the high pull canopy side of things. Where we can, an offset run-in is really great. So when you've got a run-in for high pull discipline, then that offset run-in, keep that over the other side. It is still possible to have the same run-in as long as the high pull discipline then immediately moves after opening into their portion of airspace. But having their own separate run-ins will definitely keep things safer. Cool, so summarizing everything. Have an open mind with all these disciplines, and always inquire about how to keep things safer, and especially if you don't take part in these disciplines, and maybe you want to understand a bit more so that you can keep yourselves and others safe. Appreciate that every centre is different, and we have to work with what you have, but there's almost always a way to safely conduct all these disciplines at around about the same time. And continually reassess all your procedures. Remember that deconfliction, it must work in the worst case scenario, not just the best case, all right? And think about how things could go wrong. And one thing I'll say is don't wait until you're getting on the plane to discuss something. Now, if it's, oh, you're doing a three-way and we're doing a two-way, that's like a really easy thing to do when you're being ushered onto the plane. But if it's something more complicated, like you're doing XRW and I'm doing high pulls or, you know, all of that complicated stuff, you might want to have a bit more time and not wait until you're right next to the plane, you can't hear each other to talk about this stuff. It is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. So I've gone on for long enough, so happy to take any questions or open up discussion. Hopefully there's more questions raised than answers. Yeah.
I'm wondering, in the first exit order scenario we saw, so what we have at our DZ is the FSers go first, big group to small group.
FS.
And then FS first,
yeah.
Then the free flyers, and they
yeah.
also go from big to small group. But in my experience, a small group would have of a slower descent rate, so I'm wondering if in this case it would be more logic to have the order of the free flyers reversed, so from small group to big group. I know what your idea is.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the data to see how bigger and smaller free fly groups, how much it's affected. There will be some effect, but I imagine it's a lot less than a big and small FS group. Yeah, sure. But yeah, it'd be interesting to look at that data. Part of me thinks that you could maybe have a real mixture of you know, FS and free flying, and I think maybe drop zone operators will hate me for saying that, because it does keep it simple to just have it, you know, hard and fast free FS and then free fly, or the other way around. And maybe you could organize things by canopy size, but then you just need to be aware, like if you're an FS group after a free fly group, you need to probably like double your separation count. So it would call for much more experience in jump mastering to do that. So I see how we have to kind of have a one-size-fits-all kind of thing within drop zones. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Is there a rule of thumb for the cone drift and the winds aloft versus like the angle the cone makes, or is it not that?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of calculated with quite a lot of algorithms. There's ways of doing it which would take a long time by hand. You know, doing like free fall drift calculations when I've been taught that in the military. Yeah. To do that, it takes quite a lot of time to do it accurately. So not entirely sure how the algorithms work, but yeah, so the stronger the winds, the tighter the wind cone is, and the lighter the winds, the wider it is. Yeah. Yeah, but definitely the wind cone is like a guide that you don't want to track outside of that wind cone, because if you then open, then you most likely won't be able to fly back unless the winds are different. Makes sense. Yeah.
Thanks, Phil. With the free fly first or the FS scenario.
Yeah.
Appreciate there's lots of scenarios we talk about. Where would you throw tracking into that? If there was one tracking group, would they still go ahead of those two?
Yeah, generally trackers go first. Sometimes in really high winds, if the trackers go first and then track at 90 degrees, they are then outside the wind cone. So then maybe in the higher winds you could have like trackers out the back. So that, yeah, there are different ways of doing it. But yeah, in high winds you want to worry about not tracking outside the wind cone. Yeah. Anything else? Cool. Thanks, guys. I'm conscious we're going to go over time, but yeah, thanks for your attention.